The media, like the narrative has been that there's a youth crime crisis. They're talking about, these hotspots of young offending trends. Like these are all communities that have always been overrepresented in all these categories since blackfellas were forced to live there.
Yeah.
We say something's a current crisis and it sort of shifts responsibility away from like what's happened previously or what hasn't happened.
Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Impact Policy Podcast. Today we're recording out at Impact Policy HQ, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're on Gadigal country. I want to pay my deepest respects to our elders, both past and present, and I want to recognise and remember that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and that was never ceded by treaty. Today I'm sitting down with Kuyan Mitchell. He's a director here at Impact Policy. You'd be familiar with his face and his content, and today's yarn we chew up a few different topics. Particularly, we dive deep into his most recent thought leadership piece, explore place-based co-design in terms of how we start to think about, particularly around youth justice and youth policy, more specifically there as well. And then we also reflect on our most recent conversation with the crew at 13 Yarn around mental health. So we take a bit of a personal and professional sort of reflection into mental health. A few big pieces there that we really hope that our listeners will get a lot out of today. Bit of a different format. We bounce around a few different topics instead of just going deep into the one. So we'd love to hear your feedback around what you get out of today's episode, if it's valuable, if you enjoy this kind of structure as well. So please don't forget to follow us at Impact Policy. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share with your networks. If you can ask anything, it's a free resource that we produce to try and add as much value as we can for the sector. So if you get any value out of any of the content that we create and put out there to our networks, please share it with anyone that you think might get something out of it. Really helps us to build some momentum and keep doing the great stuff that we do. So thank you so much. Please enjoy the next episode of the podcast.
So we're like in the final of the second tier, but there's some money, I can't remember what it was. And we had a 10-all draw to Kempsey, but they scored first, so they won it. So we were down 10-0 and came back.
Yeah.
But my left knee was swollen like this big, just from a knee knock. There's nothing wrong with it. You can get cool and you warm up. Yeah. But I said I'm not playing in the final. I was eating KFC, having a bunda. I remember I was laying there with my leg up, going, I can't. It was fuck last game. Now it's worse because we had a break.
Yeah.
Come on, cuz, just come sit on the bench. Yeah, righto. Didn't warm up, nothing. I'll sit on the bench. As a start centre, cuz, left centre, go. Oh my. Then about 5 minutes in or 10 minutes in, they go, push to lock. So I played the rest of the 50 minutes at lock. And I couldn't get my body low. I'm only skinny,
Yeah.
I was looking these lads from Kempsey in the eyes. They knew that I knew that they knew I didn't want it. You know what I mean? And I was going to get it,
Yeah.
And I was coming in. I try and get my body low because my knee, I just couldn't get low. And I just get lifted again and again. Ducky.
Kempsey bar.
They kick deep. I run back because this one had that centre at the start. I run back to have a hit up. Yeah. Lifted, bang. Ducky goes next. Whack, bro, straight around. He's about 6'3", straight around his lips.
Yeah.
Brad had to pick him up out of the mud, kick for touch, and he took the next run.
Yeah.
After he was out,
Yep.
He got himself. He was doing these ones.
Yeah.
Got himself up, took the next one, went bang. Bruh.
That was it?
I didn't want to be there until then. After that, I was that's mad. That's mad.
Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Knockout season is amongst us.
Proper.
Oof. How do we go for anyone listening that wants to know what we're talking about? How would we explain the Koori Knockout and how important it is?
Are we recording?
Yeah, bro.
Oh, true.
Little Kuyan Mitchell highlight reel to kick off the next episode of the Impact Policy Podcast.
It was just about me getting lifted anyway.
How do we explain it? Modern day corroboree gets thrown around? What would you say? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just an Aboriginal Rugby League tournament. Probably the biggest gathering of definitely the biggest gathering of Aboriginal people in New South Wales every year, by a mile.
Yeah. I think what I love about it, bro, is how it's almost like the epitome of like our communities being able to self-govern this sort of stuff. Like the fact that like this football tournament that started out as like I think it was 8 teams 52 years ago. Is still running every year, hasn't missed a year, and every year it's like almost every year is a different community hosting it, coordinating it, determining where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. Like, you know, all the decision-making power gets to lie with the host community, you know, that takes it out. I love that. And we know that we've seen it, like, morph over the years, you know. We're probably younger generation, you know, and you even more so. Like, but I know that, like, older fellas older than us will talk about how much it's shifted from when they was younger to how we sort of see it today, you know, with the growth of it and the investment into it. But yeah, like, for people listening, you know, like, the Kuyan Knockout is, the largest gathering of our people, at least in this state, probably the Southern Hemisphere, if you build it out even more so, you know.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's obviously changing at different times, but the little knockouts are growing like really big at the moment.
Yeah.
I was listening to the Kuyan Knockout podcast through the week, and they were talking about that. I think it was it Lismore they had like 40, 50 teams, something crazy big.
Yeah.
For like what's like, it used to be a little knockout. It's like the size of the knockouts back in the day.
Yeah.
But now it's the little one. It's like the size as the big one back in the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think Big George Rose credits that Knockout podcast to the Impact Policy podcast.
Does he?
Yeah, bruh. Because he'd see our shorts and that, you know, on LinkedIn and Instagram, and then I'd see him. You know, our kids are mates, so we'd see each other from time to time, and I'd keep geeing him up about how easy it is, you know, like, not easy, but like, I'm like, bruh, you can do one, like, you should do it, you know. And he credits, like, finally kicking it off to Impact, geeing it up. So
mad. Their podcast is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just listened to the one with Jason Munro the other day.
Yeah,
I was mad.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
good. Like, even all the old stories that I don't even know about. Like, it doesn't matter that, like, I don't even know, like, been to Armidale once in my life, but like, I like hearing the stories about it, you know, like,
absolutely.
You don't have to be connected to it. It's good.
Yeah, totally. People don't probably know, but like, one of our first jobs at Impact Policy was the State Library, New South Wales, did an exhibition for the 50th anniversary of the Knockout, and it was the maddest exhibition, fully interactive. Like, you walked into the State Library and they'd set it up like you were walking into a mini football field, and they got all this archive photos and, you know, old jerseys and all this sort of stuff. But they engaged us to tell the stories. So we produced like 6 different stories. So, you know, we did one about the origin of it. We went out to Armidale, did stuff in Armidale, did stuff around the women's stuff, because a lot of people credit the growth of women's rugby league to the Knockout. Yeah. You know, and a lot of people don't think about that. But yeah, women really fucking put it on the map, you know, in terms of how it grew out of there with what we see today. Yeah,
for sure. Like, it was popular long before mainstream women's rugby league was popular. Like, in our communities, it was just the norm. I tell you a yarn, bro. One of my mates is Māori, right?
Yeah.
So his family have a Māori knockout.
Yeah.
Not that they have a team over there.
Yeah.
But I've been trying to get a run for years. Like, I've never even been there before. You know what I mean? Like, they're not giving me one.
Yeah.
But they have, like, when the fellas are playing footy, they have a euchre tournament. So, like, every community brings their 2 best players and they have a tournament on the side of euchre.
Hectic. Yeah. How good is that?
I reckon something like that could be taken over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Might have to send it off to the Rose Boys. Get a euchre tournament set up.
It's, you know, you hear, you've heard different yarns over different years where they've tried to sort of tag off the back of, you know, the opportunity of all our communities coming together to do different things like that. When I first come into the public sector, I was working at Aboriginal Affairs, and they had a little stall, and it was really sorry. Like, they had some water and some sunscreen that they were giving out, or like, it was just some real basic sort of stuff. Because you see a whole range of stalls at these events, you know, some of them are great, some of them pretty average. But I remember saying to the director at the time, like, it blows my mind that there's no strategy around engagement and participation in this event. Like, it's been going for 50 years. It's going to go for another 50 years. And like we've said, it's the largest gathering of our people coming together. And so if you think about the amount of investment of resources that goes into hearing our people's voices, you know, consulting, getting feedback, you know, providing access, you know, people having access to be able to have their voice heard and all that sort of stuff. you know, of course there's ways to navigate that. That's appropriate, but it would just blow my mind that there was no clear direction around what the presence was for a lot of these agencies with the knockout. Because for me, it's so much more than just handing out some water and some, you know, tote bags with your logo on it. It's about, like, you know, we've got so many people together. We've got young people, we've got elders, we've got communities from across the state, all in the one place over a period of days. You know, what better opportunity for organisations to actually build relationships, build rapport, build trust, you know, have accountability as well. You know, giving our people the opportunity to speak back was really, really important. And organisations are getting better. Like, I remember, I think it was the Nowra knockout, that 50th one that you were mentioning. Like, I think it was someone did this great job. It was I don't know if it was Newswalk, but it was an organisation, and they had archive photos, and it was like all these old black and white photos, and they didn't know who they were, and so they had photos up, and they were like, you know, can you help us identify who these, like, people are in these photos, and all this sort of stuff, like photos from old knockouts and old community events and all this sort of stuff. And it was mad, because you'd see, like, people in there going like fuck, that's my pop, like, you know, and this is his name and all this sort of stuff. Or we seen, like, the Languages Trust one year, so they're doing all their stuff around language revitalisation, making sure everyone there knows what they're doing, how they can access grants and resources to support language work in their communities, like actually really tangible ways to do engagement and communication, as opposed to just handing out lolly bags and treats, you know, which has its place, it's still really important, particularly at events like that. But yeah, I think people listening, you know, and thinking about that sort of stuff, it's very twofold.
You know, like 2 years ago for the Nowra knockout, to jump across topic, but NITV did a piece with Uncle Phil and Picky and Chock Ingram and that from home in Cowra about Arambi being like 100 years of Arambi. Yeah. Oldest continuing Aboriginal rugby league club in Australia. Yeah. You know? So I did all this stuff and all this information, and like I watched it, but like I grew up there, I didn't even know that stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's heaps of opportunities and things that, like you're saying, like for different communities or different organisations to be able to contribute, and then in turn, like, sort of be sharing, like both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were down there for that Nowra one, and we did those videos for the exhibition, we interviewed the South Coast Black Cockatoos. Yeah, that was one of the videos, and they had a memorial team. So, you know, like, people that are listening, you know, some of our teams represent our communities, our countries. Sometimes there's a memorial team that's put together in respect of someone who's passed, and different reasons why, like that we come together. But this memorial team took it out that year for the South Coast. And I remember we produced this piece around their journey, and we went down to Nowra and we shot it. And I remember we shot it in this, like, the place we were supposed to shoot it fell through in terms of the location. And so we ended up just getting this tiny little, like, meeting room at the RSL down there. And it was like it was the most sorry place to do an interview, you know what I mean? Like, really old, rundown, like, room we were in. But bro, it was the maddest piece that we produced, because like, we had six of the fellas there from the team to tell the story and the journey. But like, like, when a story is really powerful and it has a lot of meaning, you forget about what's going on in the background, you know, what the background looks like, how the lighting looks, how pretty it is. But like, when something's powerful and you can connect to it, everything else just sort of blurs away, you know. And I'll never forget that, bro. Like, the ability to try and, like, capture that story for the brothers down there, like, yeah, massive. You know, no bias to, like, not being from Lapa, but living so close to Lapa, and my son, you know, coming up through their nappy grade stuff there. They've actually, like, I swear, for like the last 5 years,
they lose to whoever wins.
They just lose
to whoever wins.
They're not getting slapped. They're not getting pumped. Yeah. Like, so for me, like, I've seen it and I remember it, and I'm like, And their junior teams go really well as well.
They just won A grade too.
Yeah, so
maybe this is the year.
Fuck, let's go Lapa.
I agree. It's convenient for me to bring it back to Sydney too. Tell me it's a long way for me.
LA all the way, bring it home. So
Yeah.
fingers crossed for the Panthers. A bit of a knockout yarn there for people that might not know about that. It's really important for us, the Koori knockout. So if that's a new yarn to you, hopefully that adds some value to how you think about and understand, dates of significance for us on our Koori calendar here. But this episode that we're talking about, it's not the traditional sort of impact yarn where we have guests come in. We're trying to shoot more episodes and more content regularly, to try and add value for our community and stuff like that as well. Got a stack of stuff that's been going on at Impact as well, but I've got a couple of notes for things that I wanted to have a yarn about too. But where do you want to start? Do you want to should we explore your thought leadership stuff you chucked out this week?
Yeah, it's just a short article I wrote, and it was quite short. It was really just a really clear point I was trying to make, reflecting on time in the public sector and now at impact policy, but also just broadly engaging in media and politics. And obviously there's so much going on in the world at the moment. When we think strategically thinking about providing social impact that's positive for our mob, and it can be so reactive, particularly maybe not so much our people, but the institutions that interact with our people, really interactive with certain trends.
Yeah. And
there was an article in The Guardian which inspired my article a couple of weeks ago. That youth crime was down 34% or something like that in the last 2 years, but the media, the narrative has been that there's a youth crime crisis, communities are unsafe. Chris Minns and his government 2 years ago brought in tough new bail laws around certain types of offending, which there was levels of trends of that type of offending, but the bail laws, have really impacted particularly regional Aboriginal young people who come into contact with the justice system. Pretty damaging. James Clifford, who's an ALS solicitor, we've done a bit of work with, and I worked with back in the Koori Court days. He was quoted saying, it clearly outlines that there's not a young offending crisis in comparison to years gone by, and that there's really good examples of community place-based initiatives that have actually brought crime down in a lot of communities. So the whole idea of the article is we use the river as an analogy for quite a few things here. Being able to zoom out from the ripples on the surface and really understand the undercurrents of trends and looking past trends, because when we just focus on trends, we're reactive and change. But the issues, that have been in a lot of these communities that are overrepresented, not just in the justice system, but health and housing and, falling behind in education, all the close the gap sectors that are relevant to close the gap, the consistencies far outweigh the year-to-year trends that we see reported. And I think social media plays a big role in this. Narratives can just catch fire really easily. And for most of the conversations about our people that, these narratives, we have a small voice in it. We're a small part of the media, we're a small part of our own country. And it's just about looking past that, because when they're talking about, these hotspots of young offending trends, these are all communities that have always been overrepresented in all these categories since blackfellas were forced to live there. You know what I mean? Like the undercurrent, the consistencies are far outweigh the trend. And there's no point addressing the trend when we've failed to address the actual underlying issues that have always been there. So that's pretty much what the article's about. Probably in as many words too. You probably don't even have to read it now.
Yeah, don't worry about reading it. You're right. You've got the full scoop. Yeah, look, I think it's interesting, isn't it? People might have heard some of the other yarns that we've had, and I know you've put links in for some of those other episodes that we've dived deep into the youth crime, youth justice sort of space with regards to a lot of that sort of stuff. But I think you're right. You make that comment there around the river and the undercurrents, And we sort of see that a lot of those sort of areas of overrepresentation in terms of need and gaps in our communities remain consistent. And so whilst policy systems respond to perceived crises and different things like that, these other key factors or key pieces of the puzzles in our communities remain unaddressed. So we continue to understand that disengagement from school is one of the most earliest risk factors for potential contact with the justice system. But we're less inclined to recognise the investment in that from a crime prevention approach.
Yeah, I think not being able to look at things holistically is a major problem at all times, and it always has been, particularly because we section everything off, which makes it hard. I also think that when we use words like crisis and they're things that people are attracted to.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean? That's much more attractive to people, which sounds crazy to say, but it is. Then this is an ongoing issue we've been unable to address.
Yeah.
We say something's a current crisis, and it sort of shifts responsibility away from what's happened previously or what hasn't happened.
And people want a quick fix, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to be he's in a crisis, we can fix a crisis.
Yeah.
As opposed to actually address the underlying factors.
This is also crook to say, but it really is true. It's people also attaching themselves to crisis when they haven't grown up having that experience.
Yeah.
A lot of people who actually probably care and stuff, they maybe without knowing, they find it romantic to be attached to something that's a crisis because it's outside of, and then they go home to their normal life, their stable life.
Yeah.
A crisis is romantic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
An ongoing cycle is not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it leads to poor resourcing, short-term resourcing, short-term solutions. Like James said in the article, I think it was really well put. Place-based, long-term, community-led solutions are proven to be effective.
Yeah.
It's we've spoken about it before, but it's one of those things sometimes it's not complex. The people interacting with it are complex, the systems or the individuals or the funding, that makes it complex, but the solutions, the evidence is quite clear. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I actually feel like that about a lot of our work.
It's not complex.
We see
our communities aren't complex.
No, and I think our communities see they see clearly what how to navigate to the solution thereafter. But it's all the stakeholders, and I think being able to speak the language is something that's important that we can do because of our different backgrounds.
Yeah.
We can be that conduit almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Because the complexities are on not the community side.
Yeah,
it's on the other side.
It's on the policy side. It's on the practice side. I feel the same. I feel like that's where we've been able to add some of the biggest value is people talk about walking in two worlds or something, and there's a lot of different interpretations of what that means for different people. But I think that's a really good example for many of us here in terms of how we navigate and add value amongst that sort of stuff. Both ways too, speaking back to some of those decision makers and people in those sorts of spaces and places as well around what some of those impacts are on the ground, I think is something we've been able to do as well. I guess one of the exciting things we're starting to see more is more recognition and investment around place-based work, place-based co-design, and investment locally, which we've been able to see here in New South Wales.
And I think there's a development as well in how people are making decisions around funding or sharing decision making. I think that's a big part of that.
Yeah, that commissioning piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I wasn't seeing that 5 years ago.
It's been quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been significant. That was one of the things that come off the back of when I was at the evaluation conference last week, and they were talking about commissioning and evaluation, very specific sort of sector. We're talking about policy right now, but it's great to see it cross sectors, people talking about the decisions that are being made around funding, around projects, they should be made by, or at least heavily influenced by, the communities in which those resources have been designed to serve. And we've seen examples where things haven't gone so well when that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
There's a stack of examples we can think of at Impact particularly, where we've seen stuff like that happen. And we've provided specific feedback around procurement and commissioning and advice and guidance too. And some of that's received well, some of it maybe not. But yeah, we're definitely seeing a shift, which is valuable.
Yeah, and I think I haven't had a heap of experience in being on that side of the table, but I have had a little bit. I also don't see the negative of sharing that decision or handing it over, because you're actually safeguarding yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
If there's a decision that sometimes no matter what decision is made, if it's made in the wrong way, it's the wrong decision. Yeah. It's not. It's about the process and the transparency of it, and not holding power. Yeah. When you probably not. It's just definitely not the best. There's no way that you would have more information on what the community need than the community. Yeah. So it's definitely not right. Yeah. And you're also putting yourself at risk, which is also, that's your own fault. I'd say accountability is a really important part of it. But we're seeing better examples when people do it in a way that's community led. So you just hope that trend continues, and people see other people doing it, get a bit of confidence to do it the same way, reach out to support. We're seeing people reach out for advice on how to do things differently, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm involved on this ABSEC commissioning sort of working group at the moment, so that's been really nice to be a part of that as a working group member as they move towards more Aboriginal-led commissioning in terms of the work that they're doing. And then there's stuff happening in the public sector, in philanthropy as well. I think for people listening, if you're working in a space where you're responsible for grant funding, procurement, making decisions around resources and where they get allocated, I think Kuyan makes a really great point. One, it actually gives a level of sort of integrity to the process and decision-making process. It shares power. And in a lot of ways probably safeguards the team in terms of decisions that you make and directions that you go in, because you're really being informed as best possible by community where you can. So if you're not doing that already, it's something that we really encourage you to start to think about, how you can start to bring that sort of stuff into practice, bring our people into those sorts of spaces when you think about governance and decision making, when you're looking at recruiting, when you're looking at awarding tenders or pulling together panels, it's absolutely critical at a minimum that you've got representatives on that group that are at least Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, but ideally from and connected to the communities in which those decisions are going to affect the most. So yeah, important stuff to be thinking about and taking away.
I think as a principle, when processes are transparent, it benefits the community or whatever the outcome is. Yeah. The more transparent the decision making process is and shared, the better it is. Which is a simple principle, but it's always true. Yeah. And you can apply it to any context, I reckon.
Definitely.
Lack of transparency doesn't benefit the people that the process is meant to benefit. Always. And that's an experience that most of our communities have had, is that lack of transparency around different points of the processes. Totally. And then you get parts of it which you're privy to. It's really just working around the edges of things that are already predetermined. The same with co-design, whether it's the commissioning stuff. And I think people are more willing to be transparent when they're opening up or sharing power with the people that they should be, because you're working with integrity, so you don't feel the need to close the doors.
Totally. Absolutely. And then one of the things we wanted to have a yarn about as well was, me and you both jumped on the 1-3 Yarn podcast a couple of weeks ago. Really appreciate them having us as a part of that conversation. So we thought it might be nice to reflect on that a little bit. Mental health and well-being, it doesn't discriminate. Our people are significantly overrepresented in a lot of statistics that concern mental health, but I'm sure these sorts of conversations are something that anyone listening to this podcast, you know, can connect and resonate with in terms of what we speak to. I guess, like, what were your thoughts coming off the back of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I remember having a yarn to you afterwards, and it was funny for me because starting at Impact, you know, like being involved in content that goes out is something like that I was really hesitant about and still have like reservations about in some ways. And I know like we always try and do things in a way that's to our values and things like that. And I came out of it thinking like I was really grateful to be a part of it. And then you like reflect and you think, well, like a lot of my friends or cousins or family, most, you know, you've had like mental health struggles in the past. You know, they're things that are personal, and they're things that like are changing all the time. You know, like you learn more and you change, you pivot, change lifestyles, and then you might go back, and then so it's an ongoing journey. And then when we like talk on our platform or platforms like ours, it's almost like there's a societal expectation to talk with finality about things, to center ourselves as experts. And even though we might have heaps to contribute and have expertise and lots of stuff, when you center yourself and like, I think it's really easy to accidentally elevate yourself as the final, I've got this covered, because that's the norm. Yeah,
hang on, these fellas have got a microphone in front of their mouth. They must be the oracle of all things mental health, And
that's really not the case.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that we don't have things that are valuable to share, and like things that people might resonate with.
Yeah, definitely.
Like both things are true at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's probably like applies to a lot of our work. Like if we talk about co-design, like we have a lot of expertise in there, but we still learn all the time.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like people learn off us, that's great, but they should also like outsource further.
Yeah, definitely.
In anything that we do or talk about.
I hear what you're saying, you know. I was probably disappointed myself in terms of how I prepared for that conversation, in terms of I walked away feeling like there was a lot more I wanted to probably talk about.
Yeah.
You know, I think I sort of remembered after it the stuff around the postnatal depression for fathers and the statistics around that sort of stuff. And, you know, it was like 1 in 10 of fathers report experiencing postnatal depression. And I remember when I first read that stats, you know, having what I believe having had experienced that at one of those stages was how much I believed that, like, wow, you know, we know how much our people and men in general don't self-report those sorts, like when we're not feeling good anyway. So when I seen the stats of like 1 in 10, I was like, it's got to be higher than that. You know, that was my first thoughts around that sort of stuff. So, you know, even just like delving into that sort of conversation around, you know, fatherhood, masculinity, and mental health, and all the intersection around that, I think was something that's really a valuable conversation that, you know, we're probably not talking about enough. But a stack of sort of stuff there, you know, like, and I think biggest thing for me was for like that's a whole different audience. Like our audience is, you know, a range of like, you know, general population sort of people with shared values, but it's also very much a professional network of supporters and listeners for the stuff that we do as well. So I think that's why it was important for us to bring some of those reflections and yarns here around how to navigate that sort of stuff and how to stay well. And I don't know, like in the context of that, you know, and thinking about employee well-being and all that sort of stuff as well, you know. Have you had times where you've been no good at work and in those sorts of worlds?
Not in this role, like this year, but definitely like in the past. You know, after we did the podcast, there was things I was thinking about as well. When I was thinking, you know what, there's probably things that were more personal to me that would have had more value than speaking as someone who works in the sector when I don't. Or I guess not speaking as, but engaging in conversations that probably not in. The conversations were great, you know what I mean? But just in terms of what I contributed to, like, you know, I have a group chat with 2 cousins of mine from back home. None of us live in the same place, and like that's really like central for me. Do you know what I mean? Like little things like that. Because I know like for some people it's exercise and all these things are really positive, but just like having your little versions of community when you don't live at home or around. A lot of family at the moment.
Totally.
Like I think stuff like that is really important and probably more relevant to blackfellas than like a lot of mainstream mental health yarns, because community and family are like can be like the most positive and like things that make it hard when you're disconnected from them. You know what I mean? So like it's really central for me and probably for like a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that, so much of that stuff comes back to connection, whether it is in the workplace, you know, whether it is in your families, extended families and communities, like actually having like a time where people are encouraged to like actually meaningfully try and connect with people, and how that looks like, you know, is going to be very different. But like, you know, encouraging workplaces to facilitate spaces where their staff actually meaningfully building a relationship with each other, you know, doing an activity together or learning about something about each other, I don't know, or, you know, ways that we're actually more practically building stronger connections with each other, I think is a big part of it.
Yeah, but I think connection is so essential. And like a lot of these things, like I'm just even reflecting on what I said before. We were talking about connection, like to family and things like that, and disconnection. We think of these things as like Aboriginal concepts, but they're probably just human ones. But like blackfellas are like, our memories are stronger to like when that was, you know, for us, like the roots are deeper. So like it's more front of mind for us. And I always think about these things as black things, but they're just human things. But they're just we just hold them as a higher priority than like mainstream society.
Yeah.
But they're things that we should like. It should be central for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. My cousin Duck, he said that to me once. Like, this is just human things, but you're always framing it in your mind like black things. And yeah, it's one of those examples for sure. And especially, you know, we're talking about work and the sectors that we work in and talk about. Like, I've definitely had mental health struggles working in certain environments, you know, because those environments were important to me. Like, a lot of black fellas work in environments that are emotionally difficult for them.
Yeah.
We all, like, we work with them all the time, and they do it because it's important to them, but it's really difficult for, like, a lot of the mob that we work with day to day.
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
It's a big yarn, isn't it? Around vicarious trauma, around navigating like well-being when you're working in or alongside community, and yeah, how you stay well and not burn out.
And we've had a few people, like I had someone this morning actually reach out following our last podcast about lateral violence that me and Sean did. Someone messaged me this morning saying, like, you know, I'm having these issues in the workplace.
Yeah, really? Like,
really enjoyed listening to the podcast. I live in Western Sydney. I'd love to come in for a coffee.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean? That was just today.
Tell them to sign up for our cultural supervision program.
Yeah, that's right. But I was like, man, that's pretty cool.
That's mad.
And then you have the imposter syndrome, because I'm half Guani myself all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, so then you're like, but then like if we're sharing experiences that people relate to, and then they're reaching out and they want to connect, like, that's pretty special, I think.
Wow, that's mad. I didn't know that. You saved that for the podcast to tell me that, didn't you?
I wasn't even going to tell anyone, to be honest. But
mad.
Yeah, and I think because it's a shared experience that like we've all had, like different things like that, you know, like I think like when we feel isolated in our experiences, or at least for me and like people close to me, like that's when it's more dangerous and difficult to pull out of, like that isolating feeling's like really tough. And you know, I think for a lot of mob like myself, I've been in Sydney for a long time, you know, but for other people I know have come from like, you know, regional communities where you know everyone at the footy club and all these types of things. When you relocate for different reasons, it can be quite isolating, you know. So, you know, we're in Woolo here, and I know we're trying to do some more stuff with the community and things like that. But I think that's really important.
Yeah,
you know, that we continue to create space. And here in Sydney and South Sydney and the inner west and Lapa, like, you know, people do such a great job of it, making space.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. I love that story. I love that someone felt safe enough that they could reach out to you as well and tell you that, you know. And I think it reminds me of, like, we're just going to be patting ourselves on the back and plugging how good we are now. But, you know, it's like...
Yeah.
Someone reached out, though, and said to me a couple of weeks ago about how, you know, they're working, they're quite isolated where they're working. they're working in our sort of space, but they have no access to cultural supervision. And they were saying like the podcast is like feels like cultural supervision, and I sit there and listen to it in the car, and it really has a significant impact for me, and when we hear stories like that, it means the world, because it means people feel safe enough, they feel seen enough, and that they can reach out and share that sort of stuff, and that for some people listening, we're on the right track with adding value,
Yeah.
And like you said, not all this is Aboriginal stuff. A lot of it's human stuff.
Yeah.
Which is why I think a lot of people are resonating with what we're yarning about and what we're talking about, and I think I wanted to lean into some of that challenge around lived experience and working in this sort of space. And so I think that'll resonate with a lot of listeners, whether they're in our communities or not, that have lived experience and find themselves working in sectors or in communities or programs where they have a connection to that sort of space, and how you navigate that sort of stuff and keep yourself well. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of workplaces are trying to adapt and adjust to, in terms of how they recognise lived experience as an asset, but also how they invest in and also adjust, workplaces so that they can make sure that those people stay well and stay there and keep adding value.
Yeah.
I burnt out in the community sector, bro. I was there for 10 years and working in Waterloo, and I was working in a community mental health AOD program with clients that were family members of my friends, people I'd grown up with and knowing each other's families intimately. And a lot of those stories and journeys very, very similar. And I found after a while that I was getting so triggered by it and becoming actually like jaded, and I was losing empathy. I was losing empathy for my own people and my own, friends and extended family. And I knew then it was time to leave, I knew then it was like when I got to that point where I was losing that empathy, that it was time to step aside and take some time away for people to be able to come in and bring some fresh energy and fresh eyes to be able to do that sort of work. And sometimes you got to give yourself permission to do that. Sometimes people feel like they might be failing themselves or failing their people or their communities that they're connected to, if they leave, or it becomes such a big part of their identity,
I've definitely been through that a couple times, you feel the guilt, especially if you're in a situation where your leaving will negatively impact whatever space you're in, and the people who are more vulnerable than you that are impacted by it, like positively and negatively,
totally,
depending on where you are. That's a hard one. But then you're right, it's actually a disservice to everyone if you continue to push through, because your empathy fades, attention to detail, you care about things, and you're better off letting taking that breather and letting someone who's more equipped in that moment to hold the space. But a lot, it's a pretty common experience, I think.
Massively.
I think part about the podcast and even a lot of the storytelling, the comms that we do, that Jesse used to say it a lot actually, but the shortest way to someone's through story, and I think that's again, it's a real blackfella thing, but it's probably just a human thing that we're more connected to. But we talk about storylines and songlines and been around since time began, and we think about them in terms of country. I've always thought of them in terms of ourselves too, when you share story, that's very, it's something that we do a lot, but it's really important. When you listen to story, when you share story, and then when you connect story, do you know what I mean? Like a part of our story at Impact, or us as individuals, we connect with people and we share a part of their story with them. It's not really just about work, but just in our day-to-day lives. I think that's really important. When Mob passed away, what do you do? You spend the whole week, month, whatever, just telling stories. Because our songlines are sort of who we are too.
Totally.
And they start from before we're born, and they will go on after we leave. That's why I just think it's so important to create space, you said before, where people are able to learn more about each other. I think in cities where we are here, we devalue individuals because so saturated with information, people. like we never really provide time for that. So I guess for me, like they're like the really important things.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, we've chewed up a couple of different topics. I think we've had a bit of a reflection and a bit of a yarn on mental health. If anyone's listening and anyone's struggling, and they want to reach out, they want to have a yarn, we'll put some notes in the show notes there for different resources and support that is there. Please know that you're not alone. You're never alone. Many of us are navigating tough times. Some of us better than others some days different too. So we'll have some resources there. We chopped up some stuff around the knockout, so hopefully for those of you that listen, you've been baptised into the significance of the largest gathering of our people on the Southern Hemisphere. And then we dived a little bit deeper around Kuyan's most recent thought leadership piece. So we'll have some show note links there if you want to just see some of the resources that he talked about referencing, and different stuff like that to consider when we think about policy development, the impact of media, and how what we're seeing is really more significant investment in terms of place-based co-design and the impact that we can have in terms of addressing those more broader social indicators that can impact interaction with the youth justice system. But overall, I think we did well.
Different sort of structure for us than like a normal podcast. That for people who listen regularly, I'd be really interested to hear like feedback.
Definitely.
Like of how people enjoy this compared to like one subject or one topic or one guest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we haven't really bounced around like this before. So
definitely.
if you've listened this far, then hit us up and tell us what you think.
Surely there's one.
Surely
there's one still here with us somewhere. Man. All right, thanks, bro.
All right, thanks.